Hello everyone, we are here with another Modern League, and this time we're playing what I'm calling Beseech Inverter. So it is an Inverter of Truth Thassa's Oracle deck, but we are looking to leverage Beseech the Mirror as a 5th through 8th copy of Inverter of Truth primarily. It is also a 5th through 8th copy of Jace Wielder of Mysteries, so it is extra copies of both of our combo pieces. In theory, it's also extra copies of Thassa's Oracle. So that one is a little bit less relevant, though, because we'd have to set up a kind of contrived situation where we've already inverted and Oracle's one of the bottom couple cards in our deck. Never mind. In any case, we're looking to leverage Beseech. We are ramping into 4-drops, and to do that, we have Pentad Prism and Talismans, sort of the old standbys from the Esper inverter list. Now, there's probably the first question is why Dimir and not Esper? So, Beseech makes things a little bit awkward, because Beseech, if we want to leverage it, it's really not very good with the Esper part of the combo. And the Esper Inverter deck is designed to have maximum redundancy, and that's why it is playing Inverter. So Inverter is acting as redundancy for spoils in that case. That's great. But what do you do when your hand is something like Beseech, Phyrexian on Life? Well, alright, no. Let's say like Beseech, Angel's Grace, Thassa's Oracle. I mean, yeah, maybe you can play 4 mana or pay 4 mana for a spoils, but that's gonna feel bad. And maybe you can Beseech for an inverter, but then why do you have the spoils? Maybe there's a world where you're playing so many combo pieces that literally your entire deck is combo pieces and a little bit of mana. But for now, I'm a little more interested in playing something like this, where if blue-black has enough redundancy, potentially we don't need the white cards. Now, the white cards are definitely powerful, but pure blue-black allows us to do a couple of different things. One is it lets us play, well, first of all, I'll preordain, because we don't have deck slot issues the way we do in Esper, where Esper, I mean, we need to have 4 spoils, 4 Angel's Grace, and some number of unlifes, probably 3, maybe 4. So we're looking at 12 cards that we have to cut. That probably has to be the forces, the preordains, and then the artifact package, and then we can play like maybe 1 or 2 pacts. That's it. So our entire deck is combo pieces. So we can't run the Urza Saga package, we can't run the Force of Negations, we can't run the Preordains. The Preordains and the Force of Negations give us a little bit of... The Preordains are a little bit of searching, which is definitely nice, or a little bit of consistency. The Force of Negations give us a little bit of an interaction, and the Urza Sagas give us a plan B. The Urza Sagas potentially can also act as protection with Hope of Girper. Also, they can fetch out a Tormod's Crypt in a grindier game in order to empty our graveyard so that we can inverter and then combo more quickly. The one thing I will say about this list, as far as cards that are missing or should be added, I think there's a strong case to be made for some number of subtleties in the 75. Potentially, you can make the case main deck, definitely at least in the sideboard. I just don't have subtleties online. And the other big glaring thing here is the One Ring. This deck should definitely be playing probably 4 copies of the One Ring. Not sure what the cut would necessarily be for them, but it really does feel like a deck that is primed to take advantage of the One Ring. Because, for example, we can end up in a situation where we've inverted a few cards back, then we can use the One Ring to clear the rest of our deck, and then play an Oracle or a Jace. So it really adds some consistency in those, like, awkward games where our graveyard has a few cards in it already. We can Beseech for the ring. It's useful for extra copies that way. It can stall for time. This really should have the ring in it. Simply, I do not have the ring online, so I'm playing a version that doesn't have it. But if you're trying this and you have access to the ring, make some changes, play the ring in this deck. It will be better. The deck I feel like is already pretty good, though, even without that. Some of the choices of lands in sideboard, we've got Mistvault Bridge, which is an artifact essentially sacked to Beseech. It also improves the size of our constructs. We have Takenuma as a utility land, which is kind of interesting. We can mill 3 cards. So again, if we end up in a situation where we've inverted back too many cards, we can potentially Takenuma to get through our deck quicker, get down to like 0 cards in order to play Thassa's Oracle. It even has the usefulness of returning a creature or planeswalker, Thassa's Oracle or Jace, from our graveyard to our hand. So that's kind of an interesting utility bit here. We have the Shelldock Isles. Shelldock Isle might be a hated card to some people. Shelldock Isle, though, is pretty powerful here. We generally are not going to need blue mana on turn 1 that much, despite what these preordains might make you think. The preordains are much more likely to get played on turn 2, alongside either like a Talisman and then play preordain, or like we played a tap land on turn 2 and then we're playing a preordain on turn 2. So we do generally have the mana to weave in the preordains where needed. This is not something we necessarily want to be playing on turn 1. In fact, it's something we kind of want to be playing as late as possible in order to figure out what we need to be preordaining for. Do we need to be preordaining for a Force of Negation? Do we need to be preordaining for an Inverter? Do we need to be preordaining for an Oracle? Do we need to be preordaining for an Urza Saga? What type of plan are we on this game? So Shelldock is, the math is that you are about 50% to hit a Jace or an Oracle if you have none in your hand. If you have one in your hand already, that number drops to about 45%. Playing a tap land is essentially playing a 1 blue mana cantrip that has a 50% chance to find you one of your combo pieces. And beyond that, it has some other fringe utility. I'll totally take that. So definitely the Shelldock Isles are something that I'm interested in here. 1 Cavern of Souls is just to try out. That's not something that's necessarily I'm sold on. But the ability to play an uncounterable Inverter or Oracle could kind of be interesting. If anything, what we're really trying to be here is we're trying to be modern Doomsday. If you're at all familiar with Legacy Doomsday, we're trying to be the modern version of that. Notice that we have the forces. We're trying to really play as like a combo control deck. We have Leyline of Sanctities against any sort of discard. Our hand can definitely get shredded by discard, so even though we can't hardcast them normally, I'm definitely willing to take these. With Pact of Negation for situations where we need more counter magic. Echoing Truth. Like I said, there should be some number of subtleties in here. We have Chromatic Lantern against Blood Moon. Pithing Needle as a Saga target, more Tormod's Crypts for either Grave Hate, or if we need to be more consistent about exiling our own graveyard. And also Shriekhorn is kind of an interesting fringe thing where we can put it into play and then more quickly work our way through our deck post-Inverter. So those are some of the ideas. This deck definitely needs to be iterated on a little bit further. This is a pretty rough draft. The Urza is in there as a Beseech, as a value, like fair Beseech tutor target that we can potentially use in a grindier situation. I just pulled the Urza out of my deck. But that's the idea, you know, Inverter with a backup plan of Urza's Saga. Saga tutoring out Hope is nice. Conjurer's Bauble potentially gives us some utility if we like play a Jace or an Oracle. It gets countered post-Inverter, and then we can like bauble it back, redraw it, and then replay it. Shadow Spear, the usual stuff for Saga. And then Springleaf Drum is interesting because we can potentially end up in situations where we have like 5 mana and a drum that we can tutor with Saga, and then we can use the Inverter to make a mana to play the Oracle or something like that. So that's the deck. And we can see how it fares in some matches. Again, biggest takeaway though, this deck should be playing the Ring. If you have access to the Ring, this should be playing it. I just do not have access to it online. Let's get right in there with match number 1. So we're here with game number 1, and let's see how this goes. So our opening hand is decent. We have 2 lands. We have an Inverter. We do have a Preordain to find us hopefully another land or a Mana Rock. We have a Conjurer's Bauble, which is whatever kind of here. And then we have a Shadow Spear, which could get equipped to a Saga token potentially. So we're going to keep this. On turn 1, we can just nicely go for the Preordain. However, they open on Swamp, Thoughtseize, and take our Preordain, meaning that our turn 1 play is now going to be this Urza's Bauble. So this definitely slows us down a little bit, and we also definitely don't like to see this Demolition Field when we're playing an Urza's Saga, given that they can just immediately use it next turn. We do, however, draw Talisman of Dominance, which is nice, because that is at least some mana acceleration we can get out and get things ramping for us. The problem here is we really need another mana. We do have a basic to replace the Urza's Saga, but we also need a blue card. I can potentially try to Beseech for Jace. Now our opponent goes for the Demolition Field here. So what I'm thinking at this point, why I didn't make a... Oh wait, no, they didn't in our draw step, so we couldn't even make a construct in response. But here, we're in a pretty awkward position. Well, I guess it's not that awkward. So what we can do is we can Beseech out a Jace, which is what we're going to do here. I think. I played these games a couple days ago. So we can play Dark Slick. I think I nearly passed through my turn, but there we go. Yeah, we can play Dark Slick. We can Beseech. And we can sacrifice the Shadow Spear, given it's not likely to matter at this point, and get the Jace. By the way, our opponent is on the Cabal Coffers deck. Pentad Prism is really not our best draw. We're a little bit slow here, which is also a slight problem. And at this point, we have kind of another dilemma. The dilemma being that they very likely have the removal for Jace. So if I go for Inverter here, there's a good chance that I just die because I don't have any sort of protection. I would like to find an Oracle. So that's why you saw me play that Preordain there. The problem is, I mean, the Preordain found an Urza's Saga. It also found a Beseech. We could maybe have taken the Beseech and then Beseeched for an Oracle just to tutor it to hand. This is kind of slow. I actually think trying to kill them with constructs is going to be a little bit faster. And maybe we end up in a spot where we can Inverter and then go for a kill on this. Where they have to leverage their removal for the Saga tokens, and then we can go for a kill with Inverter. Now this is a little bit slow because we definitely have cards in our graveyard. They're also Demolition Fielding. That was just in play. I'm not sure why I was talking about making Sagas, but it's better than nothing. We potentially get to leverage past that if we find another Saga, although we have already burned 2 of them. And here they have March for the Jace, so we would have definitely lost had we gone for Inverter there. And now we can draw a card with this Bauble at some point, so that is definitely an option. Another thing we can do here, though, now that they killed the Jace, is that we can play the Inverter in order to put the Jace back in our deck, and now only play the Jace at the end. And with the Force of Negation as some measure of defense, I feel a lot better about this. So we did have to burn our mana countering the Cling to Dust on the Jace, which is a little bit annoying, but I do have a decent amount of other mana with the Pentad. Now we just need to get through our deck. We do have the Bauble to draw us a little bit, and once we draw the Jace, we can potentially play second Inverter. They do have a Field of Ruin to take us off of one of our non-basics. And then they play the Ring, which we don't really care about that much here at all. And they have Fatal Push for our Inverter, and again, that's totally fine. So we go to our turn. We can Preordain. Force of Negation is good. That's something we can keep in our hand. And hopefully we'll get to untap and use it and not have to burn these Pentad counters on it. Our opponent has yet another field, this time a Demolition Field. So they've had 1, 2, 3, 4 fields so far. So that is pretty unfortunate. And then they play Karn, and we do kind of have to force this. It's all of our artifact mana, but it would turn off our artifact mana if we didn't force it. So we force that. We can see what we potentially draw. We draw Beseech, but we only have 3 mana. Again, I'm trying to hold off on using this Bauble because Wait, hang on. I need to go back for a second. Did I put an inverter back on the bottom? Maybe I should have put the force back on the bottom. Or potentially, yeah, no, probably the force, or maybe even a land. But we can play the Shadow Spear here, figuring we will potentially start drawing some sagas. So we can see a lot of the cards in our graveyard aren't cards we necessarily care about. But really, we're just looking to hit some more mana. We do have 2 sagas to do that, as well as a Jace. So our opponent is going to bring out this Troll of Khazad-dûm. We draw a Preordain, which is, again, not really what we need. We can definitely play it, though. We find a Saga and Jace. So here we're going to take the Saga and then put Jace below that. And then we can go for... Well, we can't go for the Jace. And that's another problem here. Because the Jace requires 3 blue and we only have 2 blue. Now, we're going to have to re-inverter and or win with the construct tokens. However, our opponent, so we could have maybe ended up in a world where, okay, we make a construct token the next turn or the turn after, equip Shadow Spear, we're racing this Troll of Khazad-dûm, and then we inverter just to sort of refill our deck so we don't lose to decking ourselves out. However, our opponent had the 5th field and killed our Saga. So they're hitting us with Troll of Khazad-dûm. They are drawing a bunch of cards with the ring now. So we are definitely under the gun. Their hand is very full. And while this ring was okay at the time, our draws have really not lined up too well after that. We've kind of drawn things in a pretty bad order here. So now they have 13 cards, they have Thoughtseize, and that's going to be the game. We don't have time to draw another land, inverter, and work our way back to Jace before this troll kills us. So a bit unfortunate. We ended up in a spot where we just kind of got buried under fields. If we had even 1 fewer field, there was definitely a chance. Maybe not here with the ring getting all the way up to 5, but that's how it goes sometimes. So we lose game number 1, but we are on to game number 2. So with game number 2, we have a Leyline of Sanctity and our opening hand here, which is very nice. We have a nice quick ramp to 4 mana. We also have Jace plus Beseech. So we do need to be a little bit careful about potential removal for the Jace, but overall I feel okay about this. Our opponent has Leyline of the Void, and Leyline of the Void is honestly not even good against us. We want our graveyard to be clear, so I'm happy about that. We play the Talisman on turn 2, they play a second land. We have an Oracle here. We can play the Jace, and then we can continue to ramp, looking to... so wait, let me stop there for a second. We can continue to ramp, so if we get to 6, we can just Beseech Inverter and then Oracle in the same turn. We don't need to worry about potential removal on Jace. Now, I actually made a little bit of a mistake here. The mistake was I milled my opponent instead of myself. I should have milled myself, given that there was the Leyline there. I don't necessarily want to give them free value because I already knew from game 1 that they're playing Cling to Dust. Also, they're playing Coffers, so it is just known that they play Cling to Dust. So that was a small mistake. Nothing crucial, but definitely not ideal. Our opponent taps for Bowmasters and shoots our Jace. They can attack it further. And they do have Field of Ruin here. Which they field. We can get an island. And they march to kill our Jace. So we made the right call of not going for it there. We draw a Shelldock, which is pretty good because that means next turn we're just set on 6 mana. There's not really a whole lot they can have here, I don't think. I mean, maybe, you know, what can they even have? Maybe some sort of like damping matrix type of thing, but no one really plays that. So we play the Beseech. Notably, I'm leaving these up to potentially bluff Shelldock. Not that that really matters, because it's just the game's going to be up as soon as I play for it using Shelldock rather than using the 2 lands. They cling to Dust to draw a card, but they have nothing. We get game 2, and we're on to game number 3. So for game number 3, we have a hand here that is, it has potential, it has mana. We have a Needle for either the Ring or one of the fields. We have Shelldock. We do just need to find an Inverter or a Beseech here. We draw Shelldock. Force is actually a decent hit because we can potentially force something, and if we hit a blue card off of Shelldock, we could, when I say blue card, I mean Jace or Oracle, but we didn't. So now we need to be a little bit more careful about using this force as food. Pentad Prism is maybe the worst draw in our deck, considering I have 2 of them. I really do not need the 3rd. They cycle a Troll, getting another Swamp. I will use this Force of Negation aggressively if I need to, if they were to like play a Ring or something like that. The odds are pretty high that I hit another blue card, so I'm willing to take that risk. We go ahead and play Springleaf Drum because we're not entirely sure what we're going to Needle yet, so I don't mind holding that back. Also, it might encourage them to actually Needle the Shelldock. What did I do? I paid for that? I think that was a mistake. Yeah, I think that was actually definitely a mistake. I don't think I should have played the Force of All. I think I should have just given them the 1 card and then played the Needle. Yeah, I'm not sure what I was thinking there. Here I could have been in the same position of playing Jace next turn, but had more counters on my Pentads, which would definitely be nice, as well as having a force in hand to potentially either protect the Jace or stop some other type of threatening play that they might have. And I don't care about the immunity. So they have removal for Jace, which is definitely unfortunate. We could, yeah, we should have actually won this game. This was my punt. Yeah, I fully just should have not. I should have not forced the Ring. But, I mean, hindsight is definitely important. And maybe I've given away some spoilers here. However, I have 6 mana. So, what was I going to say? I have 6 mana, so I could, in theory, go for Beseech Oracle. However, I think it's pretty likely that they have removal. They go for the field in our upkeep, which is totally fine, or in our draw step, which is totally fine. We're going to go for an Inverter here. We do also have a Jace in the discard. So we do have both Oracle and Jace, who can... Actually, no. What was I saying? I was previously saying we could have gone for it there. We couldn't have because we would have had to Beseech sack for Inverter. It wasn't natural Inverter. However, when we have Jace in our discard, we have an Oracle in play. So let's see what they have. Well, they have Thoughtseize to take our Oracle. That's definitely unfortunate. We could have potentially played the Leyline first. So there was a decision point there. We can, however, go ahead and play the... well, we don't need to play the Leyline yet. We can play it on the turn we draw Jace off of one of these Pentads, and doing that will let us defend the Jace from another discard spell. So here we definitely are going to play the Leyline. We're splitting the mana off of the 2 prisms in case they destroy one. We still need to work through our deck a little bit, and they can definitely have removal. So we do have... What else is our discard? It is a... Oh yeah, we have Force of Negation in our discard. So Force of Negation in our discard is definitely nice. There's also a Shelldock in our discard. However, if we had drawn the Shelldock first, that's really what we would have been looking for. Then we could have Shelldocked and put the Force of Negation under the Shelldock, because what they're doing at the moment is 100% just holding removal for this Jace. So we need this Force of Negation to potentially stop some of their removal. But we end up in an unfortunate situation here where our land is our absolute bottom card. And because of that, we aren't going to be able to... We only have 6 mana, so we can't Jace plus Force or anything like that. And here I can like Beseech for the land, but it's still just not good enough. I needed the land to be higher up in my deck. Even if the land was second from the bottom, I could have played the land, failed to find, left the Beseech in my deck, and then had Jace plus Force back up off of 7 mana on the turn that I drew the Beseech. So we could potentially have been okay here. Depends. I mean, maybe they would have had 2 removal pieces, but I think it's pretty unlikely. Remember, Jace goes to 5 loyalty. So, I mean, maybe they have 2 marches, but I think we would have had decent chances there. However, I think we just should have been in a much better spot overall if we didn't force the ring. And I think that was definitely a mistake that we're seeing in hindsight here, and I think it definitely cost us the game. So that was definitely a punt. Here we just have to go for it, even though we know they have removal, because we might as well try. So you can see we're 1 mana short. But that's why we watch our games, and definitely you can pick up stuff like that where there's an improvement that can be made, and then next time you don't make the same play there. I definitely haven't. This is the first league I've played with this deck, even though I did some designing, I did some games in the practice room. So we will we'll improve with it, right? All right, so on to game number 2. And by game number 2, I mean match number 2. So we're here with a pretty solid hand. We have the potential to like Beseech out a Jace and then Inverter the next turn or something like that. We could also just like draw an Oracle. So we can see where this goes. We also just have the Saga plan here. They lead on Blood Crypt Ragavan. We draw the Oracle, which is very nice, but they are looking like scam. They discard our Talisman. Notably, that's the correct choice here. I feel like some people would definitely like discard the Inverter or the Oracle. But here, I mean, the limiting factor for me is not business. As you can see from these 3 Beseeches, it's mana. And Beseech was definitely like the worst possible draw. So we're really just hoping to draw something that can accelerate a little bit so that I can play this Inverter. Our opponent hits us with Ragavan. And maybe we can play a game with Urza Saga. That being said, I think that's unlikely. And they steal our Pentad Prism, which would have been nice for us to actually draw. And then they have Douthie. Douthie is totally fine. I don't fear that at all. We say thank you to our opponent for keeping our grave clear. We draw a Clearwater Pathway. Note that I have 2 black as needed already with Mistfall Clearwater. There's an argument that could be made for making that a black source, but there's also an argument for wanting to potentially be able to play a Jace and making that a blue source. Our opponent hits another Pentad Prism, which is again something that we would like to have here. We are going for a Saga token. Now we could have passed and then inverted, so just tap for mana, make this black, and then we would have had 4 mana and we would have had Inverter. However, at that point we are risking death to a discard spell, because they can just discard Arthas's Oracle. I feel like we had decent enough chances here that is not necessarily something we needed to risk. That being said, there definitely could be a case to be made for going for it there, because if they had a discard spell, there's a decent chance they would have discarded us again, so they would have had to draw it. However, they do have at least, they have 4 Grief, and they have more Thoughtseize, probably 3 more Thoughtseize. So the odds of them hitting a discard spell are pretty high, I feel like. So I definitely don't mind using the Shelldock to try and find a blue card before playing the Inverter. Additionally, there's the whole second problem here of if they have a removal spell, then they kill us. Because if they have a removal spell for the Inverter, suddenly, okay, our Inverter's dead, the Ragavan eats our Talisman, and now we can't play this Oracle at instant speed because it's not under a Shelldock. So I think we're reasonably likely to lose if we played the Inverter there. They have Fatal Push, they may have more Terminates. So when discard or removal spell kills us, and they could be very likely to have removal spells, given that, you know, they have stuff in their hand that they're not playing, I definitely don't like Inverter there. So we do hit a blue card because that's very nice. So that's very nice. That means that I can Inverter, and then I can flash this in on our upkeep. So they discard us and take the Inverter, which is definitely very annoying. And this actually leads back to potentially the issue of needing to play that Clearwater Pathway on black. I think the going for the triple blue with the Jace for a potential Jace was not the best play. Instead, focusing on the triple black for Beseech that we had in hand was probably better. So our opponent furies us, and here we basically need to draw Pentad Prism, and even that is probably not good enough. Opponent has an Oracle that they stole. That's fine. Darkslick Shores is not going to do it. So we lose that game. I think we definitely could have been much more in that game. I think that was, again, a mistake to play this Clearwater Pathway on black, or on blue instead of black. I was a little bit too tunnel visioned on getting the Jace out. Maybe if I had the 3 black here, I can like Beseech, sack the Crypt, have an Inverter, block the Fury with Inverter. That being said, I would have died to exactly 6 here, but maybe if they like didn't hit... Actually, no, they would have hit Talisman with their Ragavan instead of Oracle. So if they didn't have a burn spell, there's a chance. So we could have definitely been in that game as well. So, and again, you know, learning experience, things do get better later in this league. I promise. This deck actually, I think, does have some promise. But we're not off to the best start here at 0-1 and then down a game in the second match. Although, like I said, the first round was on us. And now we're here with game number 2 of match number 2. We lead on a ley line. We have Jace Inverter, we have 4 lands, we have a Shelldock that doesn't hit anything. So that was almost really good. Had we hit like an Oracle or a Jace, I would have felt very good about this game. The only downside here is we don't have, well, there's a couple downsides. One is we don't have any artifact mana acceleration, and 2 is we don't have any way to defend Jace. And our opponent on turn 1 scams a Fury. So that's a problem, especially with no acceleration, because now we're going to die before we get to do anything. Even though we do have this nice ley line. And maybe it's holding back Griefs. Maybe they chose to scam a Fury instead of Grief. Who knows? They have a Bowmasters. Goes to our turn. No, it goes to their turn. And they can attack us again. So they attack us down to 8-2. And now we're in definitely a lot of trouble here. So we do have some interesting options. I mean, we can Beseech for an Urza, and if we Beseech for an Urza, then we can potentially survive by blocking the Fury and blocking like the Bowmasters and then going to 1. The only problem is that doesn't really leave us alive against anything else. I mean, I guess if they have no removal and no other creatures, then the next turn I can play the Inverter and then block Fury plus the Orc with Inverter plus my Urza itself, because I could have blocked the Construct on the Fury and then Urza on like the Bowmasters. So technically there's a chance. In practice, it requires them to have nothing. That being said, had we had mana a turn sooner, like artifact mana, we would be in this, because then we could have played the Inverter on turn 3 and potentially been winning on turn 4 here. I know our lands don't quite line up color-wise. Well, actually, yeah, no, our lands don't quite line up color-wise, but maybe. Our opponent has extra Bowmasters, though, so that's just the end. So not the best game. I mean, even this, we were not completely out of this. Had we just drawn Pentad Prism, something, turn 3 inverted, we actually could have beaten this draw of turn 1 Fury, turn 2 Bowmasters had we had like a Pentad Prism. So we're not out of this. We were not out of this, but we lost. So now we're 0-2, and we're on to match number 3. Let's see if we can turn it around. So match number 3, we have an Oracle, we have a Force, we have some lands, including a Saga, we have a Hope of Girper. This is a pretty fine hand. We may be on the Saga plan and then feeding this Oracle to Force. And our opponent leads on Suspend Riftbolt. So they're burn, and they're not the fastest burn start. I would much prefer to see Suspend Riftbolt than see a creature. The creature on turn 1 is going to represent more than 3 damage in all likelihood. And they double Skewer. Here I'm just going to go ahead and force the Skewer while I can. I mean, yes, maybe they have a Boros Charm, but Boros Charm is instant. They can play it on our turn. I'm just kind of looking to use my resources as efficiently as possible here, and I'm kind of banking on being on the Saga plan, especially since I haven't seen any creature from them yet. So on turn 2, we can play a Saga. And I'm going to go ahead and play the Hope of Girper here. They Lava Spike us down to 11, and then hold mana up. And now we can play this Pentad Prism. Now note, I'm playing this Pentad Prism fully intending to use the mana on it to get the Saga token out. However, this is a very important breakpoint here. We might think, okay, well, we want to save the resource, the Pentad Prism in hand. What are we saving this Pentad Prism for? We're so far away from comboing with like Inverter. Really, what we're on here is the Urza Saga plan. And this Pentad Prism is a 0 mana anthem of your constructs get +1/+1. Additionally, once I make the construct, I will have 1, 2, 3, the construct, and then 4, the Pentad Prism artifacts. 4 artifacts means that our construct has 4 toughness, and being at 4 toughness means that my construct will survive a lightning bolt, which is a huge deal against burn. So this is a small decision point that I feel was very important in this game. We're going to attack with the Hope of Girper. There's no real reason not to. And we can think about sacking the Hope of Girper here. However, the issue is, if they have instants, they're going to play them on our turn. So what I would like to do with this Hope of Girper is sort of sack it as late as possible. I mean, yeah, maybe here they have Boros Charm, and then next turn they could like untap Boros Charm. Maybe they have double Boros Charm or something like that. But at this point, I need to have them not have something. If they have perfects, they're going to kill us. If I hope here, it doesn't really do anything for me. Additionally, it's an artifact that is keeping my constructs bigger. So I want to hope, again, as late as possible. So we're going to make a construct token at their end step. They're passing into our turn, which definitely reads like Boros Charm. We equip the Shadow Spear, though. And note that I didn't make a second construct in order to equip the Shadow Spear. Now, I did take the risk that maybe they have double bolt, but I would rather gain the life. And yes, maybe they have Skullcrack. And they do have Skullcrack. But still, now I'm in a position where I can sack the Hope of Girper. They can't play any sorcery speed burn, so something like a Lava Spike or a Skewer the Critics or whatever is now turned off. And basically, they have to have land, Boros Charm, Bolt, or something like that, or land, Bolt, Bolt. And that's kind of a tall order for the 3 cards in their hand. I mean, they only have 2 cards in their hand right now, and they're going to have to draw a card. And it doesn't have to be land bolt. It could just be double bolt. But they've already spent a bolt. The odds are not that high of them being able to kill us at instant speed, and we will be able to kill them next turn. So we've turned off all of their sorcery speed spells. We've also turned off creatures from them. So drawing any of their creatures are just dead draws, where normally maybe they could have Goblin Guide plus Bolt, or Goblin Guide plus Lava Spike, or Swift Sphere plus Lava Spike. There's a lot of possible cards that they could have that kill us from 5, but much less at sorcery speed. So we were definitely rewarded for holding the Hope of Girper there one turn. And the other big move was playing the Pentad Prism and burning it in order to make the construct a little bit bigger. So we win the first round here, or the first game here, and we're on to game number 2. So with game number 2, our opening hand is a little bit potentially slow with this Saga. We do have Beseech, we do have a Talisman, and we have a Force of Negation though. So we have Beseech and food for it, and we can turn 3 an Inverter. So this hand can definitely shape up. Really, I'm looking to draw blue cards, and by blue cards I mean Oracle / Jace. They lead on Echoing Truth. They lead on Goblin Guide. And I draw Echoing Truth. I don't mind Echoing Truth here. It potentially can bounce creatures if they have multiples. It can potentially be food for Force of Negation. So I do like that. And our opponent shows us a Beseech with Goblin Guide. Beseech is really not a card I need a second one of here. But on turn 2, I have this Talisman I can play. And I am getting primed for sacking or beseeching for something on turn 3. I will probably use this Force of Negation defensively. However, yeah, so our opponent has a Smash to Smithereens, and I use the Force pitching the Echoing Truth defensively. I'm okay with that. I mean, it would have been nice to save the Echoing Truth, but I didn't have another blue card, and I definitely need to preserve this mana. And we end up in an awkward situation here where we still don't have a blue card, and so we couldn't... Oh wait, no, we do have a blue card. Now we have a blue card. So our Saga ticks up. We can Beseech, sacking the Saga. We put an Inverter into play, and the Inverter is an excellent blocker. We have 3 cards in our graveyard. And so we're looking to be in a decent position to just play Jace next turn. They do have Path for our Inverter, which is an interesting choice. I mean, I guess maybe the part of the deck they saw was the Saga part of the deck, so they want to remove the constructs. But then they have Skullcrack, Boros Charm, a 3rd land for exactly lethal. Actually, no, it's more than lethal at this point. Okay, yeah, it's more than lethal at this point, but it still is a pretty rough run there. So they get game number 2 on turn 4 after having Path for our Inverter. Note that if they did not have Path for our Inverter, we could have blocked the Swift Spirit and then survived at 1, and then had Clearwater, Jace, and win. So that's a little bit unfortunate. Sometimes Burn can do that to you. We are 1-1 going into game number 3. So with game number 3 here, we have an opening hand that is pretty decent. We have a Leyline of Sanctity. We have 2 lands and some artifact mana. We also have a Thassa's Oracle. So we're just really looking for a Beseech or an Inverter. But we also have Shadow Spear and Urza's Saga, so we could potentially be on the Urza's Saga plan. So we're going to lead on Shelldock. We find an Echoing Truth, which is not a blue card, but I'm okay with that given I have Oracle already in hand. We play we play a Saga, Talisman, Shadow Spear, and then they play a 2nd Goblin Guide. So they have a creature-heavy hand, which is exactly what we don't want to see when we have Leyline. And then we show a Jace, which is maybe one of the worst cards we could possibly have here. We play the Pentad Prism. Again, at this point, we're playing this Pentad Prism as A, potentially food for Inverter Oracling, and then B, potentially we can make a Saga token off of it. So we'll see what they do, and depending on what they do, that may change how we want to proceed here. I end up deciding to try to make the Construct token with the idea of blocking here to stall things out. This does consume our Pentad Prism. However, I think there's, had we taken this hit, we go to 9. Next turn we play the Inverter. I mean, maybe we're just okay there, but if they have like another creature, there's a world where they could get us there. I tried to stem the bleeding. I think that in hindsight, this was possibly a mistake and that I should have saved the mana and then played the Inverter. Actually, no, that doesn't work though. Oh no, but Saga will be in my graveyard. No, it doesn't. Yeah, because I would have passed, Saga would have gone to my graveyard, and then I would have inverted back the Saga and been okay. So I think that was definitely a mistake in hindsight. I should have just waited there. They have Smash to Smithereens blowing up our construct and then also dealing 3 damage to us, which is definitely very bad here. And now here, I don't have the mana to do anything else other than make a construct, so we just have to make the construct. We get the Conjurer's Bauble to try to draw some mana because we need mana. And we draw the Mistvault Bridge, which is at least a land. It does make the construct a little bit bigger. We can go ahead and block one of these Goblin Guides. They do manage to kill it using the guide, but that does put us to 4. We go to 3 to play an Oracle just to have a blocker. Now maybe they have removal, but that still puts us to 1. But they use a double striking Boros Charm to kill it. Now we have an Inverter to flip our deck back. And our opponent draws their card and then concedes. So we have a blocker for the Goblin Guide. That definitely got closer than it needed to. In hindsight, well, they would have blown up our Pentad Prism. Would we have been better off there? And I mean, I saw Smash to Smithereens in game 2. So we need to have that on our radar. If they blew up our Pentad there and we didn't try to make a construct, it's kind of the same thing either way because it costs us the mana either way. This does mean I have 1 more Pentad in play for later constructs. That's not the most relevant. I think it would have worked out about the same. So, okay. Well, we got game number 3 through a nail-biter of a finish with Leyline against the burn creatures and then trying to put enough creatures in front of these Goblin Guides. So we are 1-2 and we're on to round number 4. So in round number 4, we have an opening hand. Wait, if you didn't catch that, that was an opening hand. I think it had 1 land and mostly blue cards. So we mulligan and we get something that has a couple lands. So this is definitely a bit better. We also have some acceleration. So we're really just looking for a blue card. We can potentially be on the plan of beseeching into Jace in advance, depending on what their deck is. They show a Mishra's Bauble and a Steam Vents, and then a Preordained. So they're looking like Murktide, perhaps, or like maybe Grinding Station. I don't know if Grinding Station plays Preordained. They probably do. Play a Talisman and play the Saga on turn 2. The Talisman means that we can use Saga even though we're playing a tap land next turn. So we definitely want to put some pressure on with Saga and then hopefully find a blue card under the Shell Dock in order to leverage this Inverter. We don't, but we find Force of Negation, which is not bad. It can potentially protect us after we use Inverter. They're continuing to flip cards with a Consider. I think is it going to be a Murktide? No, it's Dragon Rage Channeler. They're holding up a couple mana, so they potentially look like they are playing or have a counterspell in hand. We're going to go for the double construct play. We can also pull out a Shadow Spear here and then equip it with the Saga. We'll see if they do anything in reaction to what we're doing. And I ended up grabbing... Oh, a Hope of Girapur. Yeah, so given that they likely have a counterspell, I wanted the ability to resolve what I was doing through that. My life total is not necessarily under pressure, so I don't really feel the need to equip the Shadow Spear. And my constructs are going to be pretty powerful attackers here on their own anyway. Additionally, we have this Tormod's Crypt for whenever we need to use our Inverter, so cards going to our graveyard don't matter as much. Our opponent had an Unholy Heat with which they tried to kill our construct, but then we used Tormod's Crypt to wipe their graveyard, meaning that our construct survives, and if they were planning on playing a Murktide or something like that, they no longer can. So that was a pretty big swing. Our opponent maybe just forgot about our Tormod's Crypt in play, or thought that Unholy Heat checks on cast and not on resolution. But we got there in game number 1 with the construct token beatdown plan. We had more constructs coming next turn with Saga, and we potentially at some point could have like beseeched into a Jace as well. So on to game number 2. So we have our starting hand here. Again, we have a Saga, we have some Pentads, we have an Oracle. So we have the fast mana. We're looking for an Inverter. We have a Saga and an Urza itself to try and play a bit of the grindier plan as well, which is nice. Pentad is definitely a bad draw, though. They hit us with Ragavan, and they steal a Mistvault Bridge, which is kind of whatever. Jace is not exactly a good draw. We play Talisman, and they crack their Bauble. We now have the ability to start using our Saga, which is definitely nice. They hit our Beseech, and then they play a Blood Moon, which is very annoying because it kills our Saga. But we do have these Pentad Prisms, which do let us chain together some good colored mana, and also we have this Talisman. So it's a little bit funny that we're using the red plus our Talisman to generate full Pentad Prisms. They consider, they bolt us, and then it's looking like a Murktide, and it in fact is a Murktide. So, note, we drew an Inverter, and suddenly this game actually looks pretty decent. We have one card in our graveyard. We can use the Talisman and one of the Pentad counters to play the Inverter. And now next turn we're set up to use either the Pentad Talisman, or I could filter mana through another Pentad to play Jace and or Thassa's Oracle. Note that they didn't have a counterspell for the Inverter. They only have 2 cards in their hand, so maybe they don't. I thought the Inverter was going to get countered there and we were going to lose. However, here, first of all, there's an interesting decision point there. I played the Pentad Prism before playing the Oracle. The Pentad Prism could potentially bait a counter if they have like a Spell Snare. Maybe they'll counter the Pentad, figuring, oh, what we have is Jace, given we already saw a Spell Snare out of them. And if they have the opportunity to Spell Snare the Pentad to stop our Jace, I mean, I had the 2 blue for Oracle, right? But this is making it very clear that I'm making another blue. So I play that to try to bait things first, and it's kind of free too. Maybe they don't take the bait, but worth a shot. And then we just go for the Oracle here because we kind of have to. We don't really have another play because our deck is out. And they don't have anything, so they didn't top deck a counterspell. And we are going to win. Now note that we were in potentially an interesting situation there had they attacked with Ragavan plus Murktide, because we can't actually block the Murktide. We would have only been able to block the Ragavan because the Ragavan would have eaten our top card of our deck had we not blocked it, and then we would have died on our upkeep before or on our draw step before we got to play this Oracle. So we were actually dead to Lightning Bolt, but again, that was a risk I was willing to take when the fact was that we're staring down a large Murktide and they have a Blood Moon in play. It almost feels like we stole this one a little bit, but that's the power of combo decks sometimes. So we got that game. We're 2-2, and we are on to round number 5. Is it going to be a 3-2 or a 2-3? So we're here in round number 5. And our opening hand here is decent. We have some acceleration. We have Shelldock Isle to potentially find us a blue card. And we have an Inverter that we can play off of this Pentad Prism and or Mistvault Bridge. We also have Hope of Girper as a little bit of protection, which is nice. I'm going to lead on the Mistvault Bridge just because I'd like to be able to play this Pentad Prism on 2. And I don't need to be playing the Shelldock Isle right away, right? So ideally, my land sequence this game, and I'm thinking about this all the way back from turn 1, is Mistvault, Island Pentad, Shelldock, find a Jace or an Oracle, cast the Inverter off of the Pentad on my 2 lands. So I can potentially turn 3 Oracle here, or turn 3 Inverter if my Shelldock misses, or if my Shelldock hits. If my Shelldock misses, then I can like play Hope, and then on turn 4, Shelldock Inverter. So I don't need to be playing these Shelldocks yet. Potentially I just naturally draw a blue card, and then I'm not as reliant on the Shelldocks. Meanwhile, if I lead with Shelldock, I'm not playing this Pentad on turn 2. My turn 2 is like Mistvault Hope, and then I can't turn 3 this Inverter no matter what. So I think it's definitely correct to play the Mistvault here, but I think it's a little bit of a tricky one to spot because intuition kind of suggests, well, if you have a Shell Dock, play your Shell Dock right away. All right. We draw an Oracle, and that's totally good because that means now we don't need to worry about this Shell Dock. And our opponent has Beans. So Beans is probably pretty good for us because we have not a lot of their cards do anything against us is the thing. I mean, sometimes Teferi could be annoying against Beseech or Shell Dock, but like all of their creature removal really doesn't matter that much. We do end up in a little bit of an awkward spot here where even though I could have technically turn 3'd the Inverter, I couldn't in practice because I had no cards in my graveyard. So I'll play the Hope of Girapur. And then I'm looking at attacking and then sacking it next turn, and then using the Inverter in order to put it back on top of my deck and getting cards into my deck or into my graveyard that way. Our opponent has Prismatic Ending for our Hope of Girapur, but now I'm totally just fine because I have 5, but with the Saga 6 mana, and I can just Inverter Shell Dock in the same turn. So I Inverter, and I Shell Dock. Well, not Shell Dock, Inverter or Oracle. If I said Shell Dock, I meant Oracle. And Beans doesn't play Force of Negation, so it's not like they can do anything here. And also our combo pieces are creatures, which is very nice in a Force of Negation world. When you have just like 2 creatures as your combo, nice Force of Negation. Even if they had it, it wouldn't matter. So there's not a lot that they could have had here off of 1 green. I mean, maybe theoretically they could have had Endurance, but actually that wouldn't have even worked. I didn't have cards in my graveyard. So no, there's just nothing. So we are up a game and on to game number 2. So game number 2, match number 5. And our opening hand is pretty similar to our previous hand. We have some Shell Docks and a Mistvault. We also have Hope of Girapur. We have Tormod's Crypt too, which is kind of nice. So here I am going to lead on the Shell Dock because I don't have another untapped land. And my Mana Rock is a Talisman and not the Pentad. So it's not as critical that I have black-blue on turn 2 when I'm playing this Talisman. And I do hit the Thassa's Oracle to stick under the Shell Dock. So that's nice. Echoing Truth could potentially be useful against like a Teferi or something if I need to play something off of the Shell Dock. I have turn 2 Talisman, I drew an untapped land, and then I can play Hope. Hope puts a little bit of awkward pressure on them here because if they were to say play a Teferi and bounce my Talisman or something like that, then Hope would kill them. Or kill the Teferi. But if they play a Teferi and bounce my Hope, I'm totally okay with that. Next turn I can just like play a tap land, replay Hope, and the bounce kind of didn't impede us in any way. They go for a Leyline Binding on our Hope, which I'm totally fine with. I mean, we have this Echoing Truth if we needed to bounce it. Also, I don't really need this Hope at all. So we play a Tormod Script, and we're going to go for an Inverter of Truth. Now, this is an interesting decision point, because you may look at this and say, well, wait, your only win con is under Shell Dock, so what happens if they have Teferi? Well, what happens if we have Teferi? We have 1 card in our deck, we pass to our main phase, and then we bounce the Teferi with Echoing Truth, and then we can play the Shell Dock. So I think we have reasonable game here against the Teferi, so I'm totally willing to have this be the moment where we go for it. So we draw our Tormod Script. They haven't drawn anything else. I shouldn't have played this Mistvault actually, given it doesn't do anything, but then we go for activating Shell Dock. I should have actually played this Tormod Script first in case there's some, they don't play Snapcaster, but in case there's some sort of weird Snapcaster or something, I don't know, something out of the graveyard. They're going to grief pitch when there's nothing, but I should have played the Crypt first because they knew about it anyway. The Mistvault hides information. I do have this Echoing Truth up if I potentially need it as well. They Solitude our Inverter, which is totally meaningless. Maybe they're just trying to draw a card. And then we get there. So we went 3-2. Game 1, I think we probably lost that on the back of a punt. And game 2 could have been closer if not for a possible punt. So 3-2, given that, I mean, we pretty easily, I think, could have been 4-1. I think this is pretty good. So just as a quick reminder, this deck should definitely have some number of copies of the One Ring in it. I just don't have them online, so I'm making do with what I've got here. But this shell of Beseech plus Inverter, and then leveraging Saga both as Beseech food and as a plan B, is something that I think definitely is pretty interesting and definitely has some amount of power behind it. So until next time, this is Mint or Minty. I don't know if I ever really specified, but it's supposed to be ambiguous. And take care.